Namaste.
Namaste.
Uh, my name is Vishwanath. I am an information technology IT professional working for a multinational pharmaceutical company. So today we have Dr. Srinivas, cardiologist. Today we are here to do a new series called Gita for Efficient Living. Today we will do the first introductory episode, and we are part of New Dharma, Hyderabad. So, Srinivas, why is the conversation of Gita is essential in my day-to-day life?
So, thanks for the introduction, Vishwanath. Let me at the outset start by salutations to our Guru, and let His grace illumine both of our minds in letting the flow of the wisdom through both of us to the audience. So, as you have said, we are doing a series called Gita for Efficient Living. This is the introductory session. So, coming to your first question, Gita is generally perceived to be a Hindu religious book, and the knowledge is for monks or people in seclusion and all that. But paradoxically, Gita was taught in an intensely practical atmosphere where the protagonist, the hero of the Gita, being Arjuna, so he was having some deep dejection and some sort of a meltdown in a battlefield. So, where the knowledge is more relevant than our day-to-day battles, if not a battle like Arjuna. So it's in fact not for monks. In fact, it's for people who fight day-to-day battles. The knowledge is intended for someone who is fighting a battle or practical problems. In fact, he had a life and death situation. So he had to be inspired and he had to be made more efficient to fight his battle. So I think that knowledge is more relevant to our day-to-day lives, number one. Number two, it in fact Gita has a chapter dedicated to how do you make yourself more efficient at work, how do you to clear the concepts of work and all that. So I don't need to go into the details of this work and all that, but Gita is an intensely practical book. The knowledge is for practical day-to-day living. So that's why we are doing this chapter, this series in fact called Gita for Efficient Living, day-to-day living.
Right. Is it historical or is it a mythological story to instill the values and morals in our day-to-day life?
Yes, so the knowledge of Gita is very ancient, so it's basically lost in the antiquity of time. The protagonist, one of the protagonists, Krishna, is supposed to be about 5,300 years before Christ. So that's almost a mythological figure. But the knowledge is at least recorded at least about, say, 2nd century before Christ by a British Indologist. And as you know, the printed paper came only in the 9th century. So at least we have no recorded date that it is about 2nd century before Christ.
Is it so ancient, right? Is it still relevant in this modern world of digital and artificial intelligence?
Yes, that happens to very old books, isn't it? So it they say it's a dialogue between two individuals. Some at least before second century. Is it relevant to us? That's in fact a good question. But the thing is, the human behavior hasn't changed much over a period of time. The human problems are projected from human behavioral patterns, which didn't change over time. Basically, our situations have changed, our gadgets have changed, our lifestyles have changed, our cultures have changed, but human behavior did not change much over time. So the problems posed by the human behavior is the same. For example, our grandfathers had the same problems which we had. How do you become rich? How do you make money basically? How do you make your life of the family life in a better way? So this is the same problems which our grandfathers faced and their grandfathers faced. So the human problems generated from human behavior essentially hasn't changed over time.
Okay.
So I think projecting it even further into the past, so the problem faced then are the problems which we face now. So if Arjuna was given a solution, that solution is relevant on this day to fight our day-to-day battles.
Right, right. If it is transmitted from one generation to another generation, how is the originality of Gita is preserved?
In fact, that's what so many people question basically. If it's so ancient, how is it possible that the original verse spoken then is preserved? That's basically to do with the technology of the language in which Gita was written initially, is the Sanskrit language.
Because today itself we have around 800 editions of Gitas,
Yes,
various
yes.
commentaries.
Yes, I agree. So the technology of the verse, Sanskrit, so it is put the verse is put to a song, put to a meter basically, which is sung like a song. So when you remember the tune, the words normally fall into place. It's a common knowledge, isn't it? So you hear a song in your childhood, you may not remember the words. If you remember the tune, words fall into place. So to preserve the originality of the verse, they coined a tune in which it has to be sung. So they taught the tune to different generations, and people were supposed to memorize the tune, and words really fell into place. When someone remembers the words, they will usually think about what's there in the verse, and the meaning they can decipher it at a later point of time.
Okay.
But what happened with that was the formula became more important than the meaning. So the verses were supposed to memorize. People started memorizing the verses, not what they meant.
So that brings me another question. So is the slokas, is originality is important, or is it the meaning that comes out? Is
Yes.
Key.
So the original intent was to remember the meaning through the verse, and to preserve the verse, they had to invent something. Since we have now a printed word, we don't need to really remember how it is chanted or the language it is spoken, because over a period of time it became a cultural part of Indian society. So it became the language and how it is spoken, how is it read, became more important than the meaning it contained. Since now we have printed letters, we printed books, we don't need to really stress on the language which is spoken. Whereas what it meant, what did Krishna really mean, that need to be brought out. So that's why we are doing this talk basically to bring out what is really meant by the verses of Gita.
right, and there is also a misconception. It occurs to me also. Do I need to become a renunciate? Do I need to become a monk in order to really implement the teachings?
Yeah, so that was a question which when I said I am doing this series, my son asked this question to me. So as I said, Gita is not only for monks, not only for spiritual activities or what they say for enlightenment, because the context was in an intensely practical way. In fact, a day-to-day situation, or in that situation it's a life and death situation for him. It's an intensely practical context in which it was spoken. So the knowledge is intensely practical then and now also. So just to finish what I said, let me not do. So does it make you a monk? It is useful for the monks also, and also for a practical man like you and me, with the family lives, with your jobs and to do and all that. So it makes you more efficient. It empowers you. The knowledge makes you more efficient to do your job, your activities, your family life.
Okay, so that brings me another question. When a particular person develop an original deep interest in Gita,
it's not like anybody can develop interest in Gita. See, the Gita started with someone having dejection. So when you want to improve, you need to have dejection. That anyway we're going to discuss subsequently. But whenever there is a sincere zeal to learn, you need to have where you want to have pose a serious question to some teacher. So whenever there is a genuine interest to learn, Gita is relevant to all of them.
right? So this brings me another question, right? Again, the Gita has happened as a conversation between Lord Krishna and Arjuna, right? So he could have taught these teachings to any people, right? Including someone like Bhishma, who is very elderly, and we also have Drona, who is very learned in archery, and we also had Yudhishthira Dharmaraja, who is an epitome of ethics and morals. But he chose Arjuna. Why is so?
One, when there is a teacher-student relationship, so the student should have a particular attitude when the knowledge has to flow freely. is not an argumentation. So when I go to a teacher, I need to go with an open mind. I can pose questions, but in fact I should pose a question, but it should be in an open manner where I am willing to examine the facts being presented by the teacher. So the Krishna subsequently says, when you go to a teacher, you should go to a teacher with an attitude of humility and an open-mindedness, and you should pose a question which is relevant and which is posed not to test the teacher's knowledge but to learn in a humble way. So Arjuna had all these qualities where he went to Krishna with an open-minded nature, and he posed the right question to Krishna. Being a hero, being an efficient man at the battle, being the most efficient man at the battle, still he went to him with humility and asked a question to Krishna, like, I have this problem. Now, can you please solve this for me? Or I need your guidance. So he had a correct attitude. See, for example, a teacher will be willing to teach a student who comes to him with humility and asks him to clarify his concepts, basically.
Okay.
So this is a perfect situation where the knowledge can flow freely.
Okay. If I'm hearing, discussion and debate is encouraged, not the disagreement and the challenges.
And argumentation.
Argumentation. That's very apt, I think, even for our conversation. Yeah. So again, if we refer Gita as a book, right? Different Gita talks names the chapters by different names, right? We see that variation by different versions. Can you throw some light on that?
As just being spoken, Gita is a continuous dialogue between two individuals, Krishna and Arjuna. So it was just a free dialogue between two individuals of 700 verses, basically. So commentators over time wanted to, it's a human mind to dissect always, isn't it? You want to make a mass of knowledge, you want to codify it and something like that. So basically it was a free verse. The original the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna did not have any parts. But subsequently, the various commentators have subdivided Gita into 18 chapters. And each of a different commentator gave different names to different chapters. But these are a general viewpoint of each chapter, but you don't need to stick to it, basically. It was a free verse of 700 verses.
Okay, since you're telling 700 verses, again, if you go to our, Shastras, Puranas, there are a lot to cover, right? And it's believed like these are the beautiful bouquet of flowers which Lord Krishna has served in this Gita, right? Can you shed that light on that context, right? In the overall context of the existing ancient wisdom, and how do you place Gita?
In the Hindu Vedanta thought per se.
Yes.
So, Hindu Vedanta thought is supposed to have three main parts to it. There's a Sanskrit word which says that it's called as Prasthanatrayam. Trayam is a Sanskrit word meaning three. So, three main legs on which the Hindu Vedanta thought rests. One is Upanishads, second is Brahma Sutras, third is Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavad Gita, as respectfully it is called. Srimad is a respectful term, Bhagavad is from Bhagavan, is the Lord himself, Gita meaning the song of the Lord, the respectful song of the Lord. So, these are the main tenets, three tenets of Hindu thought, Hindu philosophy. So, whoever over period of time, over these centuries, whichever philosopher came across, they had to match their philosophy against these three tenets mainly. Upanishads, Brahma Sutras and Bhagavad Gita. So Adi Shankara, Madhvacharya, Sri Ramanujacharya or anybody for that matter, they gave commentaries on Gita from their own point of view. They did not question the veracity of Gita or authenticity of Gita or even authenticity of the being called Krishna. So they did not question him. It is unquestionable. The authority of Gita was not questioned by anyone. But their interpretation of what the Lord said had different viewpoints. For example, as you said, 800 viewpoints. But it is one of the three main pillars of Hindu thought.
Right. Okay. And again, your explanation is also giving me another thought, right? How critical my faith in Hindu ism is relevant for me to understand Gita, or if I treat it like modern day, like engineering or medicine as a subject, can I able to learn Gita, or can I able to make best use of it?
The knowledge of Gita or the being who gave that knowledge has to be a supreme being.
Lord Krishna.
Because the knowledge was applicable to a mundane life. There are talks like Gita for management. So, from a day to day management to a business perspective to someone who wants enlightenment. So, the range is such a big. So, it covers all human thought in all the various facets a man can think of. That brings to the point the one who was supposed to be the teacher of the knowledge we call Gita. It is said that he is Krishna, but never in Gita Krishna is said as Krishna. For example, when Arjuna asks a question, because it's a question answers this thing, as with Upanishads, for example, all Hindu texts are in a question answer method. It is nothing, there is no didactic speech. It's always a question answer session between teacher and a student. Even Upanishads are like that. So in here it's the Arjuna was the one who asks questions. The Krishna is said always as Bhagavan Uvacha, it's not Krishna Uvacha, because the one who is giving the knowledge is said to be Bhagavan himself. Or Bhagavan means the supreme being, supreme. If you want to translate Bhagavan into English language, it's said the blessed Lord. In Gita itself, there are two verses, one at the beginning, one at the end, which say who is the one who is speaking. At the beginning, it says like he is Bhagavan, Bhagavata, Narayanena Swayam, meaning the one who is speaking is none other than Narayana, meaning the supreme being without form, Narayana. The one who is giving the knowledge is Narayana himself. Gita starts like that. Partaya pratibodhitam bhagavata narayanena swayam. Narayana himself is giving this knowledge. At the end, they say, the yatra yogishwara krishno tatra pardho dhanurdhara. Yatra yogishwara. Krishna, when he's at the beginning he said Narayana, at the end he said he is the yogishwara of yoga. He is the Lord of yoga. So he was addressed as Bhagavan, as Narayana himself, and as Yogeshwara. One who has the knowledge of yoga can give knowledge of yoga, isn't it? So the one who is Yogeshwara, he is the Lord of yoga, can teach you about yoga. So that's the qualification of the teacher, one who is teaching here. And there is an attitude of teacher also. We discussed the attitude of a student. What should be the attitude of a teacher, perfect teacher? One, he should be qualified. His qualifications are, he is Narayana himself, he is Yogeshwara. And at various points of Gita, you see the extreme compassion the teacher had for his student. We can come down in a few examples, where he presents a complex thought form, or even a complex concept. And then immediately he says, dear Arjuna, are you understanding? If you can't understand it, don't worry. You have a shortcut. You can do this. We'll discuss the shortcuts, what he tells in subsequent manner. Okay. But the attitude of a teacher being extreme love and compassion for the student. His qualification and his attitude.
Yeah. So this throws a light on the question, right? It cannot be taken as a literal teachings of other material sciences. So this is the one that mixes psychology, philosophy, behavior, attitude, because those are the things I'm hearing as you.
Plus, intensely practical.
Pragmatism.
So whatever is given is not for someone who is sitting in a cave and meditating. It's for our day-to-day activities, daily activities. How will you apply this knowledge to a common man, common householder? That's what we are discussing.
So essentially, through Gita, can I change my attitude and my value system and my belief systems?
Just going with an open mind. Don't have any baggage. In fact, leave your baggage and go with an open mind. See what happens for you. We have a lot of time, in fact. See what happens for you. Just have an open mind. See what's there here, and how is it relevant to you in your daily life.
Yeah, I think that's what I think in coming series I'd like to come up with more questions that are relevant to our practical living, right? With this, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to you and to our Gurudev.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Thanks a lot.